Can I wear my bat mitzvah dress to cousin Stanley's funeral? Rabbi Ilana Greenblatt's daughter asked her. Otherwise, her daughter explained, I might not ever get a chance to wear it. You see, her daughter, Hannah, became bat mitzvah in March at the last open synagogue in Los Angeles, just before it closed. But unfortunately, the party had to be canceled, or at least postponed indefinitely. In fact, it may be so long until it's safe to have a party that the blue dress Hannah had so carefully chosen might no longer fit her. To me, this story encapsulates the sorrow and losses of this past year. Instead of dancing at her bat mitzvah party in her pretty new blue dress, Hannah wore it to her cousin Stanley's Zoom funeral, who died of COVID-19. We have experienced so many losses this year, so many memories we didn't get to make. I strolled by a neighbor walking his dog while he was talking to his 5th grade granddaughter. She called him in tears because her graduation was canceled. Each loss, even a 5th grade graduation, is a real loss. Graduations, weddings, b'nai mitzvah, baby namings, vacations, interrupted senior year of college, lost jobs and income, closed businesses. My sister moved to Canada in July after living near me for 28 years, and I didn't get to hug her goodbye. That was a loss. And most heartbreaking of all has been the way people have died, alone, isolated, with iPhone family goodbyes and suspended rituals of mourning. For the first time ever as a rabbi, I have been the only person at the cemetery for a funeral, and I have been zoomed into a burial. No in-person shivas, no shared meals of consolation. As mourners, we also grieve the memories we counted on, but that were snatched away from us. A father walking you down the aisle, a long-awaited retirement vacation together, a grandparent's cradling a new grandchild, a final embrace. As the poet Mary Oliver writes, doesn't everything die at last and too soon? It's never enough time to experience all we wish for. And so we grieve not only for all we shared, but for all we dreamed of sharing, but never realized. Yizkor is our moment of lamentation for all of our losses. And this year, more than ever, the enormity of our collective loss is overwhelming. We are all mourners. We mourn for the trauma to our country and our planet. We mourn for lives cut short and the desperate circumstances in which lives were lost. We mourn for the overcrowded morgues and the abbreviated funerals. And we mourn for our personal losses too. At some point, God willing soon, this pandemic will end, but grief doesn't end. The way we survive it is by making meaning from it, allowing it to teach us, to soften us, to help us grow wiser, to live more fully. The writer and physician Rachel Naomi Remen likens us to an oyster, which is soft and tender and vulnerable within. It could never survive without its shell. But every so often, the oyster needs to open its shell to breathe in water. And when it does, occasionally a grain of sand will enter its shell and become part of who they are. And such grains of sand may be painful, but the oyster doesn't alter its soft nature because of it. It doesn't become leathery and hard in order not to feel it. It continues to open itself to the elements despite the risks involved. As we know, the oyster cannot avoid the sand. It's part of the very nature of its existence. Instead, slowly and patiently, the oyster wraps the grain of sand in translucent layers. And over time, something of great value comes from the source of its pain. A pearl is what becomes of the oyster's suffering. Disappointment, loss, and grief are part of every life. Some losses are easier to bear, but others are too big or too deep or too raw to simply get over or avoid. They demand our attention, even as confronting them is unbearable. This is the place where wisdom begins to grow. When we recognize that this loss is profound and that we cannot go back to the way things were, and we will never be the same. This is when we must take that grain of sand and coat it, not with blame or anger or bitterness, but with empathy, understanding, acceptance, love, and a greater capacity for life. Not one of us would have chosen this pandemic or any of our sorrowful losses. But we must find a way to transform our grief into pearls of wisdom, love, and a renewed appreciation for the gift of life. Today we grieve and we remember, and we learn from the wisdom of a 13-year-old bat mitzvah girl who was determined to wear her dress, even if it was to a funeral. We lament, we remember, and we carry on, emerging more whole despite our wounds and our losses. We must seize this moment, carry on, and live. We thank all of you who participated in our digital Yizkor Remembrance Project. All the names of your loved ones are recorded on our website for you to see and share. And now we take a few minutes for private reflection and remembering, and for our Yizkor prayer. We remember.